Have you ever stood in a grocery store staring at an empty shelf where your favorite food should be? It's a small, unsettling moment that ripples through your day. But it's a symptom of a much bigger, more systemic problem. Our global food system, for all its technological marvels, is a breathtakingly fragile house of cards. We rely on a just-in-time network of cargo ships crossing vast oceans, refrigerated trucks barreling down highways, and massive warehouses all operating on razor-thin margins. One storm, one fuel crisis, one blocked canal can cause chaos thousands of miles away, turning your dinner plans into a question mark. We see the cracks everywhere. A single prolonged drought can decimate entire harvests, sending prices soaring. We wage a constant chemical war on our own soil, pouring on artificial fertilizers that give us a short-term boost, but leave the land weaker and more dependent with each passing year. It's like borrowing from a planetary credit card with an astronomical interest rate. We've engineered an empire of food built on the knife's edge of efficiency. But in doing so, we've sacrificed resilience. But what if I told you that a blueprint for a truly resilient, self-sustaining, and abundant food system already exists, and that it's not some futuristic concept dreamed up in a Silicon Valley lab? In fact, it's the exact opposite. What if the solution isn't about more complex technology, but about a forgotten wisdom? A 2,400-year-old system designed to produce an astonishing amount of food year after year without depleting the earth or relying on a single drop of artificial inputs. Imagine a system not built of concrete and steel, but of life itself. A perfectly integrated, closed-loop engine of nature where nothing is wasted, where the waste from one element becomes the food for another, where water is continuously purified and recycled by the plants it nourishes, where animals, plants, and water work in a perfect engineered symbiosis, creating a whole that was far greater and more productive than the sum of its parts. This wasn't just farming. It was a living, breathing ecosystem designed for a perpetual harvest, a regenerative machine that built its own fertility and sustained its own energy. It sounds like pure fantasy, doesn't it? An infinite food system hiding in plain sight in the pages of ancient history. It feels like a myth, a legend of an agricultural Atlantis. This raises the ultimate questions. Could a civilization from the distant past, without our modern science, really hold the key to solving one of our most urgent contemporary crises? And if this system was so ingenious, so perfectly balanced, why on earth did we forget it? How does a solution this profound simply vanish from human knowledge? The search for answers doesn't begin in a modern laboratory or a corporate boardroom. It begins in the dirt, under layers of earth and time, where a team of researchers, looking for something else entirely, stumbled upon the architectural ghost of a lost paradise. They weren't looking for a solution to our food crisis. They were just digging up the past. But what they found could fundamentally reshape our future. Our journey takes us not to the dusty sands of Egypt or the rolling hills of Rome, but to the high-altitude valley of Mexico, to a time before the Spanish conquest. This is the domain of the Mexica, better known as the Aztecs. But the blueprint for their incredible system wasn't entirely their own. It was an ancient technology, perfected over centuries, with roots stretching back deep into Mesoamerican history long before the Aztec Empire even existed. For decades, archaeologists studying the remnants of the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan were puzzled. Looking at the marshy outskirts of modern-day Mexico City, particularly in areas like Xochimilco, they saw something that wasn't natural. A vast geometric network of canals and long rectangular islands. At first, they were dismissed as simple land reclamation projects. But when they started digging, they realized they weren't just excavating ruins, they were excavating farmland. And this was unlike any farmland they knew. Core samples revealed something astounding. These weren't just islands, they were meticulously layered constructions of lake mud, decaying vegetation, and aquatic plants. Think of it like an archaeological lasagna of fertility. Year after year, century after century, the soil was not just maintained, it was actively enriched, growing richer and deeper with each passing season. The physical evidence was then cross-referenced with historical accounts. Spanish chroniclers, arriving in the 16th century, wrote in disbelief about these floating gardens, or chinampas, that produced up to 7 harvests a year. 7. They described a city built on water that was so fantastically productive it could feed a population larger than any European city of its time, with a fraction of the labor and without ever exhausting its resources. Archaeologists had found the physical remains, and the historical texts confirmed their staggering output. They had uncovered the what and the where. But the real mystery, the true genius, was in the asterisk how. These weren't just simple garden beds. They were the interlocking components of a sophisticated, self-sustaining biological engine.
So, how did they pull it off? It wasn't magic. It was an elegant design. A living engine built on 3 interconnected pillars, working in perfect harmony. First, there was water. But this wasn't just a passive river or a lake. They engineered a network of canals and raised fields that acted as the farm's circulatory system. These canals weren't just for irrigation, they were the highways for nutrients and the foundation for life. They slowed water down, allowing it to soak into the soil, preventing both floods and droughts. Imagine a landscape sculpted not just to grow food, but to manage and cherish every single drop of water. Next came the plants. And forget what you know about modern farms with endless sterile rows of a single crop. They practiced a vibrant polyculture, a dense, almost chaotic-looking garden where plants worked as a team. The classic example is the 3 sisters. Corn providing a natural trellis for beans to climb, the beans fixing nitrogen in the soil to feed the corn, and broad-leafed squash spreading across the ground, acting as a living mulch to retain moisture and suppress weeds. Each plant filled a different niche, supporting the others while maximizing every inch of sunlight and soil. The final, crucial pillar was animals. Fish like tilapia or carp teemed in the canals. They weren't just a source of protein. They were active partners in the system. Their waste became a constant, slow-release fertilizer, enriching the water that would then be used to nourish the plant beds. Ducks and other waterfowl were encouraged, acting as a natural pest control service, while adding their own potent fertilizer to the mix. And here is the genius. It wasn't 3 separate systems, it was one. The plants filtered the water for the fish. The nutrient-rich mud dredged from the bottom of the canals became an incredibly fertile topsoil for the gardens. Plant debris would fall back into the water, feeding the fish and starting the cycle all over again. Nothing was wasted. Every output was an input for another part of the system. This elegant dance of give and take created a system that didn't just survive, but thrived.
But that raises an even bigger question. This constant recycling of nutrients is one thing, but how did the land itself seem to get more fertile year after year? How did this ancient engine actually build new soil, creating a black gold that modern science is only now beginning to understand? So, we've seen the pillars, the water, the plants, the animals, all working in harmony. It's a beautiful design. But looking at the asterisk what is like admiring the hands of a clock. To understand how it never stops ticking, we need to look at the gears inside. We need to crack the code of why this system was so incredibly resilient. The secret wasn't in some lost, mystical technology. It's in the one thing modern agriculture often forgets. The soil was treated as a living, breathing entity. Think of it less like dirt and more like a biological bank account. While today's industrial farms make constant withdrawals with every harvest, this ancient system was designed for constant, automated deposits. Every element had a dual purpose. Fish waste wasn't pollution, it was a liquid nitrogen deposit. Fallen leaves and plant trimmings weren't garbage, they were a carbon and mineral investment, food for an invisible underground workforce. This army of bacteria, fungi, and earthworms was the system's true engine. They broke down every piece of organic waste and converted it into perfectly bioavailable nutrients, feeding the plants exactly what they needed, right when they needed it. The nutrient loop was completely closed, and this engine had a powerful insurance policy: biodiversity. Instead of fragile single-crop fields, monocultures, they built a complex tapestry of life. Imagine a tall grain crop providing dappled shade for a delicate leafy green below it, while a deep-rooted legume planted nearby pulls nitrogen from the air and fixes it directly into the soil for its neighbors. This wasn't just planting, it was ecological architecture. Pests that might devastate one crop would be ignored by others or even preyed upon by beneficial insects attracted by a third type of flowering plant. The system protected itself. This wasn't just a farm, it was a self-regulating ecosystem in miniature, self-fertilizing, self-watering, and self-defending, a perpetual motion machine for food. It was a system designed not to fail. Which raises a huge, unsettling question. If they built a paradise that could run forever, why on earth did we abandon it? So, if this system was a near-perfect engine of abundance, a self-sustaining paradise, the question is glaringly obvious. Why did we abandon it? Why isn't this the global standard? The answer isn't a single event, but a slow-motion tragedy unfolding over centuries. The first and most brutal blow was conquest. Imagine a culture with deep, intricate knowledge of its environment, a knowledge passed down through generations. Now imagine an outside force arriving, one that sees not a Garden of Eden, but untamed land to be civilized. This isn't hypothetical. When Spanish conquistadores arrived in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, they were stunned by the floating gardens, the chinampas. But they didn't see a sustainable masterpiece. They saw a strategic vulnerability and a symbol of a culture they sought to replace. In the decades that followed, they drained the Great Lakes of the Valley of Mexico to build their new city, destroying the very foundation of the Chinampa system. They imposed their own European-style agriculture based on plows and livestock, which was completely unsuited to the local ecology, causing widespread soil erosion. But violence alone can't erase an idea. The second blow was more insidious, the seductive promise of efficiency. The ancient system was complex, a finely tuned orchestra of different plants, animals, and water flows. The new model, which would eventually evolve into modern industrial agriculture, was brutally simple. One crop, planted in straight lines for as far as the eye could see. It offered the illusion of control and massive scale, looking more advanced than the seemingly chaotic, interwoven gardens of the past. We traded ecological intelligence for brute force. We swapped a self-fertilizing system for one that would become addicted to external inputs. The great forgetting wasn't just a loss of technique. It was a fundamental shift in how we saw our relationship with the land, from partners in a complex dance to masters of a simplified factory floor. The knowledge wasn't burned in a single fire, but it was scattered, surviving only in fragmented traditions and the very earth itself. The blueprint for paradise was broken, but the pieces were never truly destroyed, just waiting to be found again.
But the story doesn't end in dust and forgotten texts. Because while empires and societies may have forgotten this system, the earth didn't. The principles are written into the laws of nature, just waiting to be rediscovered. And today, a new generation of pioneers, part farmer, part scientist, part archaeologist, are doing just that. They're digging through history, not just soil, to bring this ancient food engine back from the dead. Take a look at what's happening in the sun-scorched landscapes of southern Spain, on land that conventional agriculture had written off as near desert. Here, a collective of regenerative farmers is turning back the clock. They didn't bring in expensive high-tech irrigation systems or chemical fertilizers. They brought back the 3 pillars. They resculpted the land to create swales and ponds, small-scale water traps that mimic the ancient system's brilliant water management. Instead of planting vulnerable monocultures, they planted a diverse food forest of fruit trees, nitrogen-fixing shrubs, and deep-rooted vegetables, all working together. And they integrated small livestock to manage weeds and cycle nutrients, closing the loop. The result is staggering. On a plot of land that was once cracked and barren, there is now an oasis. The air is cooler. The soil is dark and rich with life. They're producing an abundance of food using a fraction of the water their neighbors use, all while creating a resilient ecosystem that gets stronger every year. And this isn't an isolated miracle. We're seeing this engine roar back to life in different forms all over the world. From the high-altitude terraces of the Andes, reviving ancient potato varieties, to urban farms in Detroit, turning abandoned lots into vibrant food hubs based on closed-loop principles. This proves the blueprint isn't a historical relic. It's a timeless, adaptable technology. It confirms that the code for regeneration wasn't lost, just dormant. The success of these modern projects shows that our ancestors weren't just surviving, they had mastered a system that we are only now beginning to relearn. And it begs an inspiring question. If this ancient engine can transform a desert or a derelict city block, what could its principles do on a much, much smaller scale? The most incredible part of this 2,400-year-old story isn't just that it worked on a massive scale. It's that the fundamental pattern, the very philosophy behind it, is still accessible to every single one of us. This ancient wisdom wasn't a secret formula locked away in a temple. It was an observation of nature, a partnership with the land. And that partnership is something we can all rekindle right where we live. You don't need to be an engineer or a farmer to bring a piece of this ancient future into your life. The revolution doesn't have to start with a grand design. It can start with a simple choice. It can be the choice to support local farms that practice regenerative agriculture,
turning your grocery budget into a vote for healthy soil and resilient communities. It's asking questions at the farmer's market, joining a CSA, or simply learning where your food truly comes from. These actions send a powerful ripple through our current, fragile system. But what if you want to get your hands dirty? What if you want to see this ancient magic for yourself? You can. Think of the classic Three Sisters garden, a technique used by indigenous peoples across the Americas. It's a perfect small-scale echo of the system we've been exploring. The corn provides a living trellis. The beans climb the corn, pulling fertilizing nitrogen from the air into the soil. And the squash spreads out below, its large leaves acting as a living mulch that retains moisture and suppresses weeds. It's not just a garden, it's a symbiotic community, a tiny self-regulating ecosystem in your own backyard. This is the key. The system isn't about specific plants or ancient canals. It's a mindset. It's about seeing waste as a resource through composting. It's about capturing rainwater from your roof instead of letting it run away. Every square foot of lawn turned into a food-producing garden, every pollinator-friendly flower you plant is a step towards rebuilding this forgotten connection. This isn't about perfectly replicating the past. It's about borrowing its genius to consciously design a more abundant and resilient future, one backyard at a time.